Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hi, I'm Jessie, and you're listening to Your Therapist Is Not Okay.
I want to take the opportunity today to record for you a podcast that is really all about ways that the LGBTQIA2S plus community may or may not actually show up for each other. It's been on our minds with Pride and with a lot of the current political stuff happening globally, happening in the US, and kind of leaking in every direction from the US as well. Just noticing a rise in the visibility of hate towards trans folks, especially, as well as other folks within the queer umbrella. So we kind of want to just drill down to talk a little bit about queer rage during July.
June is Pride Month, as we all know. It's a time usually seen as celebration. And we also have seen in the past couple of years how the visibility around Pride can seem very much missing. Less and less companies are supporting celebrating Pride. And if they do, there's been a lot of really interesting discursories lately on what other things they support that can be very anti-LGBTQI. And one of the things that people don't always realize is that July is Queer Rage Month. And Ryan and I decided that actually, this is a perfect time to make this because we're going to be a bit rageful today. We're going to talk
Hmm.
a lot about what's going on. We're going to have aggression and feelings because, well, listen to the episode on Your Therapist Is Not Apolitical. We are not. And
Yep,
we got feelings.
we got feelings. We're gonna share them today. Yeah, thinking about, what you're saying there about companies and pride and like what we're gonna get into some of that. We're talking about that as kind of the regression we've seen in recent years, um, around pride and around the visibility of pride. We kind of just want to start with an acknowledgement about the LGBTQIA2S plus community. And we wanted to especially acknowledge that as you go through that acronym, many people know less and less about each letter. There's a little bit of a sense of a hierarchy about who gets the attention, where there's education and awareness happening, who has most directly benefited from political changes through the years, especially with kind of gay marriage being one of the big ones that has been won, although it's under fire and kind of comes and goes, and depending on where you are. But when we get down to things like intersex or two spirit. People kind of know less and less about those. And we even have the disturbing trend of a number of gay, especially gay male influencers, talking about LGB without the T and Q, talking
Mm,
about cutting out part of the community because they're less palatable to kind of the current power structure in the world, especially in the US.
absolutely. We noticed that this aspect of thinking of it as a hierarchy is really important. You even mentioned that there was a particular push to put lesbian before gay in only recent years, in the past few decades. And that kind of push and what it meant for us as a community was really interesting and how they, especially within these hierarchy, that still stands that lesbian do they don't come first. There was a push to try to get more visibility, and we haven't really seen that happen.
Yeah, I mean, we think about like farther back in history, like following Stonewall and events like that, there were a lot of gay pride or gay power was often kind of the slogan for like the large protests or large gatherings. Of course, there were also AIDS-focused support and protest groups like ACT UP. But a lot of that attention was very much on gay, and that became more and more synonymous with gay cis men,
Mhm.
and less so with a larger umbrella community. And so that was part of a lot of the intentionality of moving the L up, or, when we started to use more of the acronym, that the L would come first to help, honor and recenter lesbian folks as well. Of course, though, within the community, we've continued to see and experience bi erasure, trans erasure. I mean, a lot of those really important leaders at the beginning of even the gay power movement were trans folks.
Yep, absolutely. Trans folk, and especially women, women of color, were very much
Mhm.
at the forefront of trying to fight and be activists towards the AIDS pandemic that ravaged the country. And so we want to acknowledge that, but also nod our heads at like there's a performative element to what
Mhm.
we're seeing right now. There always have been. We'll get into that. But we wanted to start with that. What we've also noticed, and we're going to stay right now within cis, white, gay men, there's also a lot of hierarchy within that community.
No.
There's a lot of shaming, a lot of ostracizing, and a way to fit in. And anecdotally, I've seen this a lot during Pride. Men that will starve themselves or have to look a certain way to show up and be accepted within certain spaces.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, Pride has in many ways become oriented towards a party for those folks. And it's exactly as Jesse's saying, it's a party that is not welcoming to all types of bodies and is very actively exclusionary towards other letters within the acronym, right? Where there are many parties where um, women might be, technically allowed to be there because it would be illegal in many places to say that they can't come, but they're not going to be made comfortable. There's not going to be space available for them to, feel like they're part of it. It kind of will be very feeling out of place. And many people might even complain or have looks and expressions about them being there. So that really begs that question of like, who is pride for? If it's not for you, unless you're a cis, white, gay, muscle person, like there's very few people that are actually really fully welcome, celebrated, and embraced.
Oh, yeah. And we've seen this in our office time and time again. If you want more, because that's not what we're going to focus a lot on this episode, if you want more on that, actually jump to Centered Self in our LGBTQI landing page on our website. You'll see 1,000 videos that Ryan and I've done over the years on Pride. We literally have a video talking about body dysmorphia, Pride, who is Pride for, where do you belong? So if that actually piqued your interest, jump on the website. We have a lot more coverage on that. But one of the things that we're noticing is with that exclusion, there can become a lot of erasure. And because there's not a lot of like platforms for a lot of groups, it can feel like these voices get silenced.
Mm.
I know for myself within my own sexuality, I can be definitely forgotten, mislabeled, and that's discomforting. As we were preparing for this episode, I made the comment that Denise said I had to write in here, which is, yeah, but my discomfort is not on safety.
Hmm.
There are a lot of groups that fall into LGBTQIA plus groups that actually can feel unsafe and have had their safety radically challenged, especially recently. Caveat, obviously, everyone within this community can feel very unsafe, but as we go through the letters, I think as we go through, safety becomes more precarious
Hmm.
for everyone as you go through those letters.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just, you know, an important thing for us to acknowledge that folks within the LGBTQIA2S plus community are likely to have, within any of those letters, experienced some adversity, some uncomfortable, difficult experiences, sometimes unsafe, depending on, person and situation.
Yep.
Um, and so that can actually become a wedge between folks within the community who feel like, well, I've suffered, I've been through this, so like now I need to be centered, honored, celebrated. And it's not for us to say that no, you shouldn't be taken care of, but what we are noticing is that it's important that we make a distinction between having gone through something difficult and currently being in danger.
Yes.
You need services, you need support, you need care regardless. But an example about myself that I'll share is that being queer, being non-binary, I'm still typically perceived by folks that I don't know as a cis man. As we've joked on this podcast way back at the beginning, if I put a baseball cap on, like I look like Coach.
Mhm.
I've got a beard. I've got, I don't know, a middle-ish voice. So like I pass as a cis man, which means that I get misgendered a lot, and that can be uncomfortable and lead to some awkward conversations, but it's not something that causes me a great deal of harm. In fact, there's a privilege in being able to be passing if I should choose to,
Yeah.
right? And there are places where that shows up that we'll talk about soon, like I look like my ID, and if I put male on my ID, no one's going to have any follow-up questions. So there is kind of a protective safety in that, just like there can be with passing as straight, which Jessie was mentioning earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's
Oh,
discomforting all of a sudden when
right.
someone thinks that I'm straight. It's uncomfortable. And I
Mm,
think that's the point we're making. That discomfort can make you feel like, oh, I'm like not really being seen here. I haven't felt unsafe because of that.
mhm.
Mislabeled, misjudged, but not unsafe. And what we've been noticing in the current political issue is that when your identity means that your body necessarily has to change so that you're aligned, oofed. Right now,
Mhm.
there's a lot of danger attached to that. And a lot is going on right now. A really good example would be licenses. Ryan, you just mentioned that you could put male on your license and it would match. You can't do that as a trans man.
Right. I can make the decision to be stealth to the government, and I don't really have any ramifications from that. Like I don't nothing about what my ID says is I'm like, this is the most important part of my identity to me. And so I'm able to do that and not get any questions. Whereas there are some states in the US right now where folks are not allowed to use even a legal new gender on their license, and their licenses are being recalled. They're not even allowed to keep a license that they currently have. And so people who have perhaps been living as their authentic gender, as for example, they're a woman and they have transitioned, are now having to have an ID that says male. And so you can imagine if they're crossing a border or if they're contacted by law enforcement that they don't really quite match their ID. And this opens them up to dangerous situations where they are vulnerable to being victimized by the system or directly by an individual person who has some kind of feeling or reaction to that. What they
Yeah.
see is that discrepancy. What is a discrepancy? Because they're a woman.
Yeah.
Um, so that's when we're talking about danger. Like that's a danger. I
Yes.
know folks that are like, I can't get a passport until I change my license to match my gender. Because there are still states where you can have gender that matches your identity.
Yeah.
Because at least in the US, the licenses are state to state. There are very few people that have a federal driver's license. It's like a government thing, really. But passports, those are federally regulated. So your ID needs to match your passport
Mhm.
for you to get a new passport or update your passport or something. Or maybe you've never had a passport because you haven't traveled internationally before. Um, and you can't get one if your, say, New York State driver's license says X, which is an option. You have
Yeah.
to get a new ID.
And you can understand now the precarity that is in.
Hmm.
You no longer look and present like your assigned sex at birth.
Hmm.
You now look like your authentic self.
Yep.
The backtrack of that would be horrific, time consuming, and incredibly demoralizing when you finally got to have your true identity and it's no longer being seen,
Hmm.
recognized, and now you're in danger with very limited travel options.
Yeah. So a lot of these changes are coming through transmisogyny, which is specifically a form of misogyny that is weaponized against trans women. Um, and it's a theoretically like it's a thing that has been a big influence on what we call TERFs, which is actually an acronym. If you haven't heard before, TERF is an acronym for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminism, or Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists. And it basically is a kind of right-wing conservative form of feminism that labels trans women as aggressors, as predators, that they're trying to infiltrate women's spaces and cause harm to women and take things from women
Yep.
out of some conceptualization of violence or predation. Super harmful. And it's been a lot of the rhetoric that's been used, especially in the UK, but also many other places, around not having gender neutral bathrooms or not having just people be able to choose the bathroom that matches their identity. This has led to like a lot of civilian policing of bathrooms saying like, oh, you don't look like a woman, you shouldn't be here. And this impacts many types of people, including women who don't look how you stereotypically think that they should, who
Yep.
are were born and are still a woman and maybe have broad shoulders. And so, um, this is a huge negative impact that leads to a lot of potential violence.
Absolutely. Because if you then are forced to go to a men's room, we're
Mhm.
now putting a number of individuals again at risk. And I'll speak for myself, but I will represent the cis woman community. Uh, Way less danger having
Mhm.
someone who's had to fight for their identity their whole lives than going to a sports bar on King West in Toronto. The level of entitlement there makes me feel unsafe.
Mm.
Being able to meet somebody right where they're at because they fought for it, oofed, that makes me feel incredibly safe, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the danger, that we put a bunch of assumptions on cis women of what we think danger is when the misogyny and hatred is so inherent in these rhetorics that it actually does more and more harm to those who are actually one of the most vulnerable community members in our society.
Mm. It is a old, tried and true tactic of reactionary, regressive politics to say that because children or because women are in danger, we have to do these oppressive things to other groups. There was a civil rights activist named Anne Braden in the US. And she's featured in a Flowbot song called Anne Braden, which you should listen to. And she just has this line in there. She's a white woman who lived in the US South, and she says, "I'm tired of being used as an excuse to kill black men."
Mm,
And this shows up in other oppressed groups' experiences too, where
yep,
women are being used as an excuse to oppress trans women.
yep,
And it's really twisted in that it flips data and fact on its head
yep,
and reasserts a new reality that is based only on fear and not observation of things, right? Because if you actually look at the data,
yep.
trans folks are the folks who are most often victimized. They're not predators. There's exceptions to everywhere. There's bad people in every category of types of people. There are bad people or whatever. But overwhelmingly, trans folks are the ones being attacked because they're being forced to go into unsafe places like a bathroom that doesn't match their identity.
Absolutely. I think you can now, as a listener, understand our thesis statement. There's a major difference between discomfort and the sucky things that can happen with coming out, of having to navigate difficult conversations, of not being accepted,
Hmm.
versus having your very identity being seen and chosen. It's a danger. And that's what trans folk are navigating right now. They are navigating safety, trying to mitigate violence when the very system is trying to act violently, and still trying to live authentically. And that navigation is exhausting and life-threatening at times.
This episode is really a call to arms in a way. I would say especially for cis gay folks
Yeah.
It's time for you to be loud and vocal and be radically pro-trans. You need to be showing up super supportive. You need to be asking yourself at Pride if you have any privilege, any various form of privilege where you can platform, be safely visible, etc. At Pride, use it to stand up for the other people in the LGBTQI2S plus community
Yeah,
and talk about the threat that they're under right now. Do what you can to make them feel safe and welcome. Be intentional and aware. Pride is not only a party. We need to
no,
show up for each other. We need to protest for each other. Have a great time. I hope you have a beautiful, fun Pride, but do be a little bit intentional.
yeah,
Things are shifting, and we cannot pretend that they are not shifting just because there's still an underwear party at the gay bar.
yeah. I think that's a really beautiful thing to say. And for you and I think having this small platform, we realize that let's use it. Let's be enraged for. Let's give our voice out there, even when there's a risk to do it. Because let's face it, it's so much more fun to party. It's so much more fun to not look. And it can be discomforting within friend groups or in public places to say something.
Mhm.
Again, discomfort versus what's actually happening, which is dangerous. And I think that's exactly what we've been seeing. I think a decade ago, 16 years, I'm old. I think the 90s was 10 years ago. Um,
I sometimes do too.
um, in the 2010s, we kind of had this feeling of progress. And there was this element of being able to feel like things are getting progressive. And I think there's been a collective kind of holding of breath. I'm going to use community even though we were using it as hierarchy, but within the queer community
Mhm.
of almost like what's happening, what is going to happen, who's safe and who's not. How many
Mhm.
times have I checked in on you because you're in the States, Ryan? Even though
Yep.
you're in an incredibly progressive state and city, I still check in because
Mhm.
there's a precarity right now that I think we're all watching and thinking of this progress and realizing it was never there.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, there were definitely things that have felt like progress, maybe moments that were a step forward, but like in the grander picture, these beliefs and mindsets that are violent towards folks, that are oppressive and exclusionary towards folks, they never went away. They were kind of lurking and waiting for an opportunity to be out and visible, and they are out and visible now. And that kind of, for many years, I remember kind of feeling like, oh, I should be excited because there's all these corporations, all these big companies, clothing stores, whatever, who are having Pride merchandise or who are sponsoring the Pride floats at the parade or whatever.
Yeah,
But actually, even then, and especially now, as a lot of them have dropped off, being able
yeah,
to recognize like that was never really about support. That was about them having a good image
yep,
and um gay people, especially cis gay white men, having a lot of this like income compared to folks with young families, which usually hetero folks start families younger, and they don't have extra money to spend because they're focused on just, you know, taking care of the family and paying all the bills or whatever.
yep,
But dual income, no kids, which many young cis gay folks are, they're spending a lot of money on travel and clothes and experiences, and so we're this market showing up within the queer community that people can market to and make a lot of money off. But now that that's fallen out of favor somewhat, they're quieter about it, the
yep,
corporations, because they might alienate another big base of theirs, which is wealthy conservative people.
yep. We called this rainbow washing when it was happening.
Yep.
And it's almost this pretend progress, this hidden reality of corporate greed that kind of had progressive rhetoric.
Hmm.
And as you perfectly said, that experience can feel like we're moving somewhere. But I think what was laying under the surface, probably still hidden and yet spoken about in certain circles, right-wing circles, etc., it was waiting for their time to shine.
Hmm.
And boy, has it come.
Yep.
And all the things that we've kind of seen along the way when it comes to women's rights for sure, but also when it comes to trans rights, as we're talking about,
Hmm.
we have seen that this outspoken rhetoric is now again hurting the very groups that fought tooth and nail to have some just stake at living and living
Hmm.
authentically and being able to have their choices be their choices.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we know you'll be hearing this after Pride, and these are kind of thoughts and feelings to take forward with you through all of July, which is Gay Rage or Gay Wrath Month, or Queer Wrath Month, I guess is mostly what I'd like to call it. To really keep that in mind, and we are going to take some time in our follow-up episode to kind of talk about how we can show up, what we can do, what people have done in the past and are doing now, to just think about how do we show up for our fellow community members, especially if they're more oppressed than us. And it's not about an oppression Olympics or anything like that. It's about community. It's about us trying to be together instead of pushing each other away.
Putting that community back in so it also doesn't feel like this progressive rhetoric that's actually not there. It's just
Exactly.
shining light on something that seems lovely, doesn't it? And yet we've seen time and time again that that just washes over a reality that's happening.
Yeah.
So next episode we will be much more constructive, but take some time to percolate on this. Ask us questions if you want. If you have had this happen to you or someone that you know and you have questions about it, or you want us to speak about a certain thing, also message us on Instagram at Your Therapist Is Not Okay, because we'd love to hear from you and also to be able to really make your voice shine. If you have something you want us to say that feels really important to your heart, yeah, we'll read it and be able to hopefully articulate what you want us to say with true words.
So we'd love to have your voice featured.
Yeah.
Take care. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.